Let me draw something impossible on an imaginary blackboard. Here's our universe. All of it, every galaxy, every bit of space. Now I'm going to draw a circle around it. Done. Simple, right? But I just broke physics. Because the moment I drew that circle, I created an inside and an outside. I gave the universe a boundary. But boundaries exist in space, and space is what we just circled. So where did I draw the line? Not in space. There is no there. I just used a piece of chalk and ordinary grammar to create something that can't exist. And yet you understood what I meant. Your brain made a picture. This is the problem. Our language, our visualization, our every instinct is designed for a world with edges, with here and there, with inside and outside. But the universe doesn't care about our design. What I'm about to show you is how to think in a way your brain wasn't built for. You've been asking the wrong question your entire life. Not because you're not smart enough, but because language itself is the trap. Every documentary you've ever watched, every article you've read, every late-night conversation you've had about what's beyond the universe, all of them reinforce this fairy tale that reality is a container with an inside and an outside, that existence is a place you could theoretically leave if you just had a fast enough spaceship or the right mathematical equation. This video isn't going to give you a neat answer you can repeat at parties to sound clever. Instead, it's going to dismantle the entire scaffolding of how you think about boundaries, existence, and yourself. Here's the core pain I want to address because I know you feel it. When you think about cosmic questions like this, you feel small, you feel lost. The universe becomes this massive, cold thing that has nothing to do with you, and you're just this accident, this tiny consciousness waiting around in insignificance until you blink out. And everyone tells you to find meaning despite the void, to make peace with your smallness, to be brave in the face of your own irrelevance. But that's backwards. That's completely backwards. What you're going to walk away with today is an entirely inverted understanding. The universe doesn't have edges because the very concept of inside versus outside only exists because you do. Consciousness isn't a tiny accident in a vast machine. It's the very thing that makes vast and machine and accident possible as concepts in the first place. You're going to stop feeling like you're staring at something alien and separate, and you're going to start recognizing that the mystery of out there and the mystery of in here are the same mystery. You'll gain what I call the observer's relief, the understanding that you're not separate from the question. This isn't comforting in some cheap, feel-good way. It's disorienting first, then liberating. And it'll change how you see everything from your morning coffee to your own mortality. What makes this different from everything else you've encountered? Most explanations either dumb things down into fairy tales, parallel universes as soap bubbles floating in some cosmic bathtub, or they hide behind mathematics so dense you can't feel anything through it. I'm going to do neither. We're going to use thought experiments, paradoxes, and stories that make the weirdness feelable, not just theoretically understood. And I'm going to show you why the weirdness isn't a bug in reality. It's a feature of consciousness trying to look at itself. So stay with me. This is going to get strange, but strange in a way that makes more sense than what you've been told is normal. Let me tell you about a night in Los Alamos in the late 1940s. I was working on the atomic bomb project. Classified work, tense atmosphere, everyone moving around with secrets they couldn't share even with their closest friends. The whole place had this oppressive weight to it, like we were all carrying something too heavy and too dangerous and we couldn't put it down. I needed to get away, not physically. I couldn't leave the compound, but mentally. I needed to feel small in a good way, not in the crushing way that work made me feel small. So one night I snuck away to this tiny observatory they had on the mesa. Nothing fancy, just a decent telescope and a lot of darkness. New Mexico has some of the darkest skies you'll ever see, especially back then before light pollution ate up half the stars. I lay down on my back on the observation platform, didn't even use the telescope, just stared up at the Milky Way smeared across the black like someone spilled cream, and I had this thought I couldn't shake. If I look far enough out there, am I looking at the past? And the answer is yes, obviously. Light takes time to travel. The stars I was seeing weren't there now in any meaningful sense of the word now. I was seeing where they were hundreds, thousands, millions of years ago. Some of those stars were already dead, but their light was still traveling toward my eyeball, carrying a message from a sender that no longer existed. Then I had another thought, and this one made my stomach drop. What if I could see infinitely far, not limited by light speed or the age of the universe or the sensitivity of instruments, just pure, infinite vision? Would I see the beginning of everything? Would I see the edge? Or would I see something impossible? Would I see the back of my own head? Not literally, of course, but conceptually. If space curves back on itself the way Einstein's equations suggest it might, if time and space are woven together into this single fabric, then out there and back here might not be separate destinations at all. The universe might be more like a Klein bottle than a box. You know what a Klein bottle is? It's this impossible shape where the inside and the outside are the same surface. You can travel along it forever and you never leave. You never find an edge, because the geometry doesn't support edges the way our intuition demands. I felt simultaneously infinite and impossible lying there under those stars, like I was a loop of consciousness trying to step outside itself, but always finding itself still inside. And that's when I realized the question, what's beyond, assumes a geometry that might not exist. It assumes there's a place to stand outside the universe looking in, or inside looking out. But what if there's no outside? What if the question itself is broken? I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was scared, but because I was exhilarated. I'd found the edge of my own thinking, and it turned out the edge was imaginary. The prison bars were made of grammar. But if there's no edge, you're probably thinking, what happens when the universe expands? What's it expanding into? Hold that question. It's going to get weirder before it gets clear. Let me tell you a parable. Imagine a civilization of perfectly flat beings living on a two-dimensional surface, like drawings on a sheet of paper, except they're alive and conscious. They can move forward, backward, left, right, but up and down don't exist in their experience. They're not just restricted from going up. The direction itself is meaningless to them. They don't have a word for it. They can't imagine it. It's not a limitation of their bodies. It's a limitation of their reality. One day, a flatlander genius asks a dangerous question. What's beyond our world? The others think she means beyond the edges of their known territory. Uncharted lands, distant continents, so they send expeditions. But she clarifies. No, I mean what's beyond the surface itself? What's on the other side of existence? The others laugh. Some get angry. There is no other side. They tell her. There's just more surface or there's nothing. Those are the only two options. You're talking nonsense. You're confusing people with meaningless questions. But the genius insists. What if our entire reality is curved? What if it's embedded in something we can't perceive? What if beyond isn't ahead of us in any direction we can point, but in a direction we don't have words for, that we can't even conceive of? They think she's lost her mind. But here's the thing. You and I, watching this as three-dimensional beings, we can see what they can't. Their surface might be a sphere. They walk in what they experience as a straight line forever, and they come back to where they started. There is no edge. There is no beyond in their vocabulary. But there is a third dimension all around them that gives context to their curvature. They just can't point to it. They can't walk to it. They can't measure it with their tools. It's not in their space. It's orthogonal to their space. Now here's where it gets personal. We're the flatlanders. When we ask what's beyond the universe, we might be asking about a direction, a dimension, a category of existence that isn't out there in space, in any sense we can visualize. It might be orthogonal to every dimension we experience. And just like the flatlanders can't visualize up, we might not be able to visualize whatever contains or contextualizes our universe. Not because it's not there, but because our consciousness is shaped by the dimensions we're embedded in. And this isn't defeat. This isn't cause for despair. Think about how you'd feel if you could somehow communicate with a flatlander. You wouldn't feel superior in some cruel way. You'd feel curious, amused, compassionate. You'd want to help them understand, even knowing they fundamentally can't visualize what you're describing. Now flip it. What if something relates to us the way we relate to flatlanders? Not as gods, not as supernatural beings, but simply as perspectives that exist in a geometry we can't access. Does that make you feel small? It shouldn't. It should make you feel curious. Because the question shifts from what's out there beyond me to what is the shape of the reality I'm embedded in? And that's a question you can actually work with. So if we can't visualize it, can we at least understand the logic of it? Can we think our way to what we can't see? Let's find out. When I was a kid, maybe 9 or 10 years old, I got obsessed with infinity. Not in a fun way, in a way that kept me up at night, made me anxious, made me feel like I was going to fall through the floor of reality. I'd try to imagine the biggest number, and then I'd add 1, and I'd realize there was no biggest number, and my mind would just spiral. I felt like I was going crazy. My father noticed. He was good at noticing when I was chewing on something I couldn't swallow. One day he took me into the bathroom. We had this old bathroom with small square tiles on the floor, white with black grout, very regular, very orderly. He asked me, "How many tiles do you see?" I counted. Maybe 200, something like that. "Now imagine this floor goes on forever in every direction," he said. "No walls, no end, just tiles forever. Is there a middle tile?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "Every tile could claim to be the center because there's no edge to measure from." "Exactly," he said. "Now imagine the universe is like that. No edge. Every galaxy is in the middle. So when you ask what's beyond, you're imagining walls that don't exist." I felt a little better, but then I asked him, "But this bathroom does have walls. I can see them. You can imagine an infinite floor, but you can't build one. Does that mean infinity is fake? Does it mean it's just in our heads?" And he said something I didn't understand until much later. He said, "Does it mean infinity is fake, or does it mean reality doesn't care what you can build?" That question sat in me for years, because here's the thing. Infinity isn't a place you get to at the end of counting. It's not a destination. It's a category. And treating it like a place you could reach if you just counted long enough is a grammar mistake. It's using a word that applies to journeys and applying it to something that isn't a journey at all. Same with beyond the universe. It's not a location. It's a grammar mistake. We're using spatial language, beyond, outside, edge, to talk about something that might not have spatial properties in the way we need it to for those words to mean anything. Let me break this down more carefully, because this is where most people's brains start to rebel, and I want you to stay with me through the rebellion. Everyone's heard that the universe is expanding, right? It's in every documentary, every science class. The universe is getting bigger. Galaxies are moving apart. Space itself is stretching. And immediately, you can't help it, your brain pictures a balloon inflating into a room. The balloon is the universe. The room is whatever it's expanding into. That picture feels so right, so obvious, that you don't even question it. But here's the problem. There's no room. Space itself is what's expanding. It's not expanding into anything. It's just... And this is the weird part. more space coming into existence, not occupying some pre-existing void, because voids are spatial too, just more space where there wasn't more space before. Let me give you a better picture. Imagine you're on an infinite grid of graph paper. Infinite in all directions, no edges. Every second, the distance between grid lines doubles. You don't move. There's nowhere to move to, because every point on the grid is expanding away from every other point. But everything gets farther apart. That's expansion without an edge, without an outside, without a container. Now here's the thing that makes people's heads hurt. If space is expanding, what about the space it's expanding into? And that question, that perfectly reasonable-sounding question, is exactly the trap, because it assumes space needs a container. But containers exist in space. You can't put space inside space. That's circular. That's like asking what time it was before time existed. The question uses the thing it's asking about as a precondition for the question. The universe doesn't expand into anything because anything implies space, and space is what we're talking about. It's the only in there is. There's no outside, because outside is a spatial concept, and we're talking about the totality of space itself. And this is where the container metaphor completely breaks down. The universe isn't a snow globe. It's not in anything. And your brain hates this because your brain evolved to navigate a world of containers. Boxes, rooms, caves, territories with boundaries. Your survival depended on knowing what's inside the safe zone and what's outside in the danger zone. So your brain defaults to container logic for everything, but reality doesn't care about your defaults. Let me push this further. Imagine there is an edge. Just pretend with me for a second. You build a spaceship. You travel to the edge of the universe. What happens? Do you hit a wall? Okay, what's the wall made of? Walls are physical objects. They occupy space. They have two sides, so there's space on both sides of the wall, which means you haven't reached the edge yet. The edge is beyond the wall. All right, what if there's no wall? What if there's just nothing on the other side? A true void, absolute emptiness. Well, voids are still spatial. Nothing still occupies 3 dimensions of emptiness. You can measure the void. You can say it's a meter wide, 2 meters, 1 billion light years. It has geometry. So again, you haven't left space. You're still in it. You see the problem? Every time you try to construct an edge, you end up with space on both sides. The concept of edge smuggles in the thing it's supposed to be the edge of. So what's the alternative? One possibility is that space curves back on itself, like the surface of a sphere. If you're an ant walking on a ball, you can walk in a straight line forever. You'll never hit an edge. You'll never fall off. But you're also not walking an infinite distance. Eventually you come back to where you started. The surface is finite but unbounded. Finite means you can measure it. This sphere has a surface area of such and such. Unbounded means there's no edge. There's nowhere you're not allowed to go. And this is hard to visualize in 3 dimensions because we're stuck inside 3 dimensions. But mathematically it works. The universe could have a finite volume but no boundary. You could travel forever and never leave, never find an edge, but also never travel an infinite distance. Does that make sense? It doesn't have to feel intuitive. It just has to be logically consistent. And it is. The math works. Whether it describes our actual universe is an empirical question we're still working on, but the point is, it's possible to have a universe with no edge, no outside, no container, and no infinity. It's just a different geometry than the one your brain assumes. Now I want to talk about something that's going to sound like a detour, but I promise it's not. I want to talk about observation and consciousness and why you can't separate the question from the asker. In quantum mechanics, and I spent a good chunk of my life working on quantum mechanics, trying to make sense of it, trying to make it make sense to other people. There's this thing called the observer effect. It's been misunderstood and mystified and turned into all sorts of nonsense, so let me be clear about what it actually means. Observation changes outcomes, not because we're magical, Not because consciousness has some spooky power over matter, but because observation means interaction, and interaction is physical. When you measure something, you have to touch it, with light, with particles, with fields, whatever, and that touching is a physical event. It changes the system. There's no such thing as a view from nowhere. There's no such thing as looking without affecting. And here's the deeper point. You can't ask what the universe is like when nobody's looking. That question presupposes a perspective outside all perspectives. It presupposes that reality has some definite objective state independent of any interaction, and that consciousness is this separate thing peeking in from outside. But you can't peek in from outside. You're made of the universe. Your consciousness is a pattern the universe is doing. When you ask what's beyond the universe, you're imagining standing outside it, looking back at it like you're looking at a house from the street. But you can't stand outside it. There's no street. There's no vantage point external to existence. You're inside existence by definition, and asking what's outside is like a wave asking what's outside the ocean. Now here's where this gets really interesting, and maybe a little uncomfortable. You are the universe looking at itself and being confused by what it sees. The question, what's out there, is really, what am I in disguise? Because there's no separation. The thing doing the asking and the thing being asked about are the same thing, and that question, what am I, doesn't have an answer you can observe from outside, because you're the observer. You can't step outside yourself to look at yourself objectively. Oh, you can look at your body, your thoughts, your patterns, but the thing doing the looking is always one step back, always unobserved. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. The seer can't see itself seeing. So the mystery of what's beyond the universe and the mystery of what you are, same mystery. Both are asking about the boundary between inside and outside, observer and observed, subject and object. And both are discovering that the boundary is a useful fiction, not a fundamental reality. Now, why does this matter? Why am I telling you this? Because you've been walking around feeling like you're this tiny, irrelevant speck in a vast, indifferent machine. And I'm telling you that's backwards. You're not a speck. You're not irrelevant. The universe doesn't have meaning without observers, and you're one of them. You're the means by which the universe knows itself. You're how matter becomes aware of matter, how space contemplates space, how existence asks why there's existence. That's not a small thing. That's not irrelevant. That's so significant it's almost unbearable. Let me make another distinction that's going to help clarify things. There's a difference between infinite and unbounded, and most people use those words interchangeably, but they're not the same. Infinite means endless. You can keep going forever. There's no limit to how far you can count, how far you can travel, how much there is. Unbounded means no edges. There's nowhere you're not allowed to go, no barrier you hit, no place where you fall off the map. These are not the same thing. The surface of Earth is unbounded but finite. You can walk forever without hitting a wall. There's no edge to the Earth's surface. But you're not walking an infinite distance. You're looping. You can measure the total surface area. It's big, but it's not infinite. Same thing could be true of the universe. It might be finite in volume, but unbounded in structure. You could travel forever without hitting an edge, but the total volume might be measurable. That's not a contradiction. That's just geometry we're not wired to visualize. And here's the thing. Accepting this is like accepting you can't see infrared light. It's not a defect in reality. It's not a limitation of truth. It's a limitation of your perceptual hardware. Your eyes are built to detect a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. Everything outside that slice is invisible to you, but it's not less real. It's just real in a way you're not equipped to perceive. Same with higher dimensional geometry, with curved space, with unbounded finitude. Your brain is built to navigate 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time using intuitions that work at human scales. Asking it to visualize curved space-time is like asking your ear to see colors. It's the wrong tool for the job. But you can understand it logically. You can work with it mathematically. You can recognize when your intuition is failing and trust the tools that work better. And that's not a defeat. That's an expansion. That's growing beyond the limits you were born with. Now let me throw another wrench in the works. What if beyond isn't a spatial concept at all? What if it's temporal? Everyone wants to know what's beyond the edge of space, but hardly anyone asks what's beyond the edge of time, what's before the Big Bang. And the moment you ask that, you realize the question is broken, because time started with the Big Bang. Before is a time word. It assumes time is already running. If time hasn't started yet, there's no before. There's no prior moment. It's like asking what's north of the North Pole. North is defined by the gradient toward the pole. Once you're at the pole, north doesn't point anywhere. The concept stops applying. Same with before and the beginning of time. Now here's the really weird part. Time and space aren't separate. Einstein showed us this. They're woven together into a single fabric called spacetime. You can't have space without time or time without space. They're aspects of the same thing. So if time started with the Big Bang, so did space. There's no space before the Big Bang because there's no before the Big Bang, which means asking what's outside space is also asking what's outside time. And consciousness exists in time. Thought happens in time. The very act of asking a question unfolds in time. So trying to think outside the universe is trying to think outside the preconditions of thought itself. It's like asking a fish to imagine what life is like outside of wetness. Wetness isn't just the fish's environment. It's the condition that makes fishness possible. You can't separate the fish from the water and still have a fish. Same with consciousness and space-time. You can't separate consciousness from the framework it exists in and still have consciousness. Does that mean the question is meaningless? Not exactly. It means the question is pointing at something real, the limits of our conceptual framework, but it's pointing with tools that don't work outside the framework. It's like trying to measure love with a ruler. The ruler's a fine tool. Love is a real thing. But you're using the wrong tool for the job. Now I need to talk about something that pop science loves, that gets thrown around in every discussion of this topic, and that actually doesn't help at all. The multiverse. The idea is that there are infinite universes, or at least a huge number of them. Every quantum possibility branches off into a new universe. Or every region of space is its own universe, separated by cosmic inflation. Or mathematical possibility itself generates universes for every possible set of physical laws. There are different versions of the multiverse idea, but they all share this basic feature. Our universe isn't alone. It's part of a vast collection. And people love this because it feels like an answer. It feels like progress. What's beyond our universe? Other universes. What are they in? A multiverse. Problem solved. Except it's not solved. You've just kicked the can down the road. What's the multiverse expanding into? What's beyond the multiverse? What contains the collection? You've multiplied the question, not answered it. Now, multiverses might exist, I'm not saying they don't. There are legitimate physical theories that predict them, and some of those theories make testable predictions about our universe that we're starting to check. But as an answer to the boundary problem, to the question of what's beyond, they fail completely. Because either all those universes are embedded in some larger space, which just has the same problem we started with, or we redefine universe to mean everything, all the universes together, in which case we're back where we started. We've just renamed the thing we're confused about. The multiverse isn't a solution, it's a distraction. It lets us feel like we've made progress when we've actually just moved the mystery one level up and slapped a new label on it. And I think that's worth saying clearly because there's so much hype around multiverses, so much breathless speculation, and it can make you feel like you're missing something if you don't find it satisfying, but you're not missing anything. The dissatisfaction you feel is appropriate. The question isn't answered, it's just dressed up in fancier language. So where does that leave us? I've spent all this time telling you what doesn't work, what's broken, what's confused. Let me tell you what does work. What works is humility. Not the self-flagellating kind where you decide you're too stupid to understand, but the kind where you recognize that reality is under no obligation to fit inside your skull. The universe is bigger than your capacity to visualize it. That's not a flaw in you. That's not a flaw in the universe. It's just a fact. What works is curiosity without demand. You can ask what's beyond the universe and hold the question lightly, playfully, without needing it to resolve into an answer you can picture. You can let the question change you without it giving you closure. What works is recognizing that the question itself is an act of consciousness, and consciousness is the thing we understand least. We can map galaxies billions of light years away. We can predict the behavior of particles we've never seen, but we can't explain how a hunk of meat generates the feeling of being someone. We can't explain how neurons firing creates the experience of redness, or the taste of chocolate, or the ache of loss. And maybe those two mysteries, what's beyond the universe and what is consciousness, aren't separate. Maybe they're two sides of the same question. Maybe the reason we can't step outside the universe is the same reason we can't step outside our own experience of being. Maybe the boundary we're looking for isn't out there in space. It's right here in the gap between the observer and the observed, the knower and the known, the question and the answer. I don't know if that's true, but it feels true. It feels like the kind of thing that, when you really let yourself feel it, changes how you move through the world. Now, let me give you something practical, something you can actually do with all of this. Next time you're outside at night, look at the stars. But don't think I'm looking out at the universe. That's the default thought, and it makes you feel separate, small, outside looking in. Instead, think I'm inside the universe, and it's looking at itself through me. Feel how that shifts things. You're not a spectator anymore. You're not separate from what you're observing. You're a fold in the fabric. You're the universe doing the thing that universes do when they get complex enough, becoming aware of themselves. It's vertiginous at first. It feels too big and too small at the same time, like you're going to dissolve or explode. But if you stay with it, it settles. And what it settles into is something like belonging. Not belonging in the sense of being welcomed into a club, but belonging in the sense of being a part of something you can't be separated from. You're not in the universe the way a marble is in a jar. You're in the universe the way a wave is in the ocean. You're made of it. You're a shape it's taking temporarily. And when you dissolve back into it, you're not going somewhere else. You're going home. Try that perspective flip regularly. Not as a meditation or a spiritual practice necessarily, but just as a different way of seeing. Like putting on glasses that correct for a distortion you didn't know you had. Here's another thing you can do. Sit quietly somewhere you won't be interrupted. Close your eyes. Try to find the edge of your consciousness. Where does you stop and not you begin? Is it your skin? Well, you can feel your skin from the inside and the outside. So which side is you? And what about the air touching your skin? Is that you? What about the light hitting your eyelids? What about the sounds vibrating your eardrums? Is it your breath? You breathe in air that was outside, and it becomes part of your blood, part of your cells. Then you breathe it out and it's outside again. So was it you while it was inside? Did it stop being you the moment it left? Is it your thoughts? But thoughts arise without your permission. You don't choose what pops into your head. You can choose what you do with it once it's there, but the arising itself is involuntary. So a thought's something you have, or something that happens to you. And if they're happening to you, who's the you they're happening to? Notice how the boundary keeps dissolving the closer you look. It's not that there's no boundary at all. Obviously, there's some practical difference between you and the chair you're sitting on. But the boundary is negotiable. It's contextual. It's a useful fiction for navigating daily life, but it's not a fundamental truth. And if you can't find the edge of your own consciousness, Why would the universe have one? Boundaries are useful fictions, not fundamental truths. We draw them where it's convenient, where they help us make sense of things. But reality doesn't care about our convenience. This exercise, trying to find your edges and watching them dissolve, it does something to you. It makes you less rigid, less defended, more permeable. You start to see edges everywhere in your life, between work and rest, between self and other, between life and death, and you start to see them all as permeable, negotiable, constructed. And that's freedom. Not freedom from boundaries. You need some boundaries to function, but freedom from the illusion that boundaries are absolute, unchangeable, built into the nature of things. They're not. They're tools, and you can pick them up and put them down as needed. Here's one more practice, and this one's a bit more intellectual, but it's powerful. Write down your biggest existential questions, the ones that keep you up at night, the ones that make you feel small and lost and scared. Write them down as honestly as you can. Then go through each one and ask, am I asking about reality, or am I asking about the limits of my language? Is this a question about how things are, or is it a question about how I can talk about how things are? Let me give you an example. Why is there something rather than nothing? That sounds like the deepest question you can possibly ask. It sounds like the foundation of all philosophy. But what if nothing isn't a coherent state? What if nothing is just a linguistic placeholder for a state I can't imagine? Think about it. When you say nothing, what do you mean? Empty space? That's not nothing. That's space. No space. How do you have no space? What does that even mean? It's not like you're picturing an absence of space. You're picturing blackness, which is still something. You're picturing a void, which still has geometry, still has location, still has properties. Maybe nothing is just a word we made up, and it doesn't actually refer to any possible state of reality. Maybe the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is like asking, why are there true things rather than purple things? The categories don't match. The question isn't asking anything coherent. And once you see that, the question stops torturing you. You don't have to answer it anymore. You can just recognize it as a beautiful piece of language that points at the limits of language itself. A lot of your existential questions might be like this. Not all of them. Some of them are real questions about real things. But many of them are language problems pretending to be reality problems. And separating the two is incredibly liberating. You stop banging your head against incoherent questions and start getting curious about the coherent ones. Now, I want to bring this all together, because we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure you're leaving with something solid, something that changes how you see yourself and your place in all of this. We started with a question: what's beyond the universe? And we found that it was built on assumptions that collapse under scrutiny. Edges, containers, outsides, beyonds. These are all tools your brain uses to navigate three-dimensional space and linear time at human scales. They work beautifully for finding your way home, for building houses, for throwing a ball. But reality isn't obligated to fit those tools. The universe doesn't have an edge because edges are relational. An edge is where one thing meets another thing. But if there's only one thing, if the universe is everything, then there's nothing for it to be in relation to. There's no other thing for it to meet. The concept of edge needs something on both sides, and there's no other side to everything. The universe doesn't expand into anything because it's not in anything. It's not a balloon in a room. It's not an explosion in space. It's the only in there is. Space itself is what's expanding, and space expanding doesn't mean moving into some pre-existing space. It means more space coming into existence. And if that breaks your brain a little, good. It should. It means you're starting to see past your default assumptions. But here's what we really found, and this is what I want you to carry with you. The question wasn't about astronomy. It wasn't about cosmology or physics or mathematics. It was about you. It was about consciousness trying to locate itself, to find its boundaries, to understand what it means to exist. And the answer, if we can call it that, is that you're not separate from the mystery. You're not a spectator standing outside reality, looking in and wondering about it. You're not a consciousness trapped in a body, peering out through eye holes at an alien universe. You're the universe interrogating itself. You're matter that got so complex it started asking questions. You're the means by which existence becomes aware of existence. And the fact that the question feels impossible, the fact that you can't visualize what's beyond, can't imagine standing outside everything, can't picture the edge of space or the beginning of time, that's not a failure, that's proof. Proof that you're asking from inside the only reality there is. Proof that you're not separate from what you're asking about. You walked in here, well, you clicked on this video, feeling small, searching for edges, hoping for answers that would make the bigness manageable, that would give you a map you could understand, that would let you relax and stop wondering. And I hope you're leaving with something stranger and better than comfort. I hope you're leaving with a sense that the bigness isn't out there. It's not something you're looking at. It's woven through you. You're not insignificant in a vast machine. You're the means by which vastness knows itself. You're how the universe looks in a mirror. And that's not comforting in a soft way. It's not a nice thing I'm saying to make you feel better. It's demanding. It's weight. It means you matter in a way you can't shirk. It means your questions matter. Your confusion matters. Your sense of wonder matters. Because without observers like you, the universe would just be. It wouldn't mean. It wouldn't know itself. It wouldn't ask why. So here's what I want you to carry with you. Here's the thing I want you to remember when you're lying in bed tonight, or walking to work tomorrow, or staring at the sky wondering about all of this again. The universe doesn't have edges. And neither do you. You're not lost in it. You're how it finds itself. Let that sit for a second. The universe doesn't have edges, and neither do you. Where you end and the world begins, that's a useful fiction. It helps you navigate. It helps you stay alive. But it's not fundamental. At the quantum level, you're exchanging atoms with the air constantly. At the conceptual level, you're made of stories and language and ideas that you didn't create, that came from outside, that passed through you and shaped you. At the existential level, you're a temporary pattern in the flow of matter and energy, no more separate from the universe than a wave is separate from the ocean. You're not lost in it. You're how it finds itself. The universe doesn't know it's beautiful until someone looks at it and feels beauty. It doesn't know it's vast until someone feels small. It doesn't know it's mysterious until someone asks questions. You're not outside that process. You're the process. You're how the universe does the thing it does. And if that makes you feel big and small at the same time, like you're everything and nothing, like you matter infinitely and not at all, good. That's the feeling. That's what it feels like to be awake to what you actually are. You're not broken. You're not missing something. You're not too small or too stupid or too limited to understand. You're exactly what you need to be. A finite consciousness asking infinite questions, a temporary pattern wondering about eternity, a piece of the universe shaped just right to ask what shape the universe is. If this shifted something in you, even just cracked open a new way of seeing, even if it's uncomfortable and you don't know what to do with it yet, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment. Tell me what clicked, what still feels broken, what you're going to sit with. What questions are you holding differently now? What answers did you use to cling to that you're ready to let go of? I read the comments. I learn from them. You teach me the same way I'm trying to teach you. And if you want more of this, questions that don't have answers but change how you hold yourself, ideas that don't resolve into comfort but expand into wonder, subscribe. Hit the like button if something here resonated. Not for the algorithm, though that helps, but because it tells me you want to keep going deeper. It tells me there are other people out there who feel the way I feel, that the biggest questions are worth asking even when they don't have answers. Especially when they don't have answers. Now go outside, look up, feel the night, the stars, the vastness. And remember, you're not looking at anything. You're the looking itself. You're the universe becoming aware of the universe. And that's not small. That's not meaningless. That's the only meaning there is.